The scream of the train cut the night like a knife. Headlights blasted over the empty tracks, turned the rails into two burning lines of silver. Ethan Brooks stood frozen on the ballast stones, his breath a white cloud in the cold, his shoes inches from the steel. The horn roared again, closer, louder, while a shadow stepped into the light behind him. The figure wore a long coat and a hat pulled low. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply lifted a hand and pointed at Ethan, as if choosing him from a crowd that wasn't there. People in our town call that shadow a name that made your stomach twist. The Angel of Death on the tracks. The train slammed past, wind punching Ethan in the chest, shoving him back. He stumbled, fell, rolled clear. Gravel scraped his palms. Sparks flew beneath the engine's belly. When the last car thundered by, the night went quiet again. Too quiet. The shadow was gone, like he'd been washed away by the train itself. Only the cold, the echo, and the smell of oil and iron stayed behind. Ethan stared at the dark, and the dark stared back. Somewhere, a footstep crunched on stone. That's when our story truly began. Hours earlier, this was an ordinary Tuesday in Sycamore Junction, Texas. It was a small town with a tall water tower, a diner that smelled like pancakes all day, and too many trains to count. The railroad ran like a river through the middle, and everything in town sat on one bank or the other. Folks waved at engineers. Kids put pennies on rails and came back for the flattened copper ovals. Ethan was 13, tall and curious in a way that made adults say, "Careful now." His best friend Jenna lived 2 streets over. They rode their bikes past the station master's office and tapped the big iron bell, even though there was a sign that said, "Please don't." The bell made a low, belly-deep sound Ethan loved. Everyone knew to be careful around the tracks. The school counselor came each fall and gave a talk. Never walk on rails. Never cross when lights flash. But Sycamore Junction had grown up with trains. The rules felt like saying don't breathe. You still looked both ways. You still kept your distance. You learned the rhythms of the whistles like you learned your own heartbeat. Lately, though, the rhythm felt wrong. For 3 weeks, Sheriff Collins had been parking his cruiser by the old water tower most nights. People whisper across coffee cups about someone riding the rails and getting off in small towns. Someone who slept in empty sheds and watched people's windows. Someone who knew the schedules and moved only when the crossings were dark. At the diner, Mrs. Klein lowered her voice and said, "You heard what they call him? Angel of Death on the tracks." She made the sign of the cross like her grandma used to and shook her head. "Kids, get home before dark." Ethan pretended not to hear. He and Jenna had a science fair coming up. They were building a model bridge that could hold a real brick. Mr. Brooks, Ethan's dad, worked nights as a station dispatcher, and he promised to bring home some scrap rail to test their design. "Steel is strong, but an idea is stronger," he always said, tapping Ethan's forehead. "Use is first." That afternoon, the sky turned the color of a bruise. The wind smelled like rain. Ethan's mom, Maria, left a note on the fridge, left chili in the pot. "Don't touch the stove." Back by 9, he warmed a bowl in the microwave, then sat by the front window, spooning beans and spice, watching crossing lights blink red as a freight rolled through town. He liked the steady clack, 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 the way it made everything else in the house feel safe and regular. When the last car passed, he noticed something that didn't fit. Down by the old grain shed, near the chain-link fence, a shape moved. Not a cat, not a dog. A person. The figure stood very still, too still, like a scarecrow that had learned to breathe. Ethan set his bowl down. The spoon rattled. He told himself it was just a worker. Plenty of folks walked near the tracks. But the prickly feeling at the base of his neck didn't listen. He texted Jenna. "Thought I saw someone by the shed." She pinged back right away. "Don't go out. Mom says that angel guy was seen in the next county." Ethan swallowed. His dad had told him never to mess with rumors, but he also taught him not to close his eyes to the world. "Look at what's real," Mr. Brooks said. "Real things tell the truth." So Ethan decided to look, but safe. He grabbed the big flashlight from the hall closet, zipped his jacket, and slipped out the side door. He stayed on the sidewalk, kept his distance, crossed only at the public footbridge where you could see forever in both directions. The wind pushed against him like a careful hand. The light from the station made a yellow puddle on the ground. Crickets chirped, then fell quiet when he drew close. He shined the beam toward the shed and called, "Hello? You okay?" The light hit corrugated tin, a broken padlock, a stack of pallets, and a gray coat crumpled in the corner. No person, no eye staring back. Ethan's throat tightened. He stepped closer. The coat wasn't crumpled at all. It was laid out like someone had placed it there neatly. Beside it sat a folded piece of paper, weighed down by a railroad spike. The paper was clean, white, almost too clean for a place where dust turned everything brown. Ethan lifted the spike and unfolded the paper. A single line was written in even, careful letters. "Trains carry more than freight." "What does that mean?" he whispered. The wind took the words and hid them. He wanted to run home and slam the door and tell no one. He also wanted to take the note to his dad and watch the lines on Mr. Brooks's face change, the way they did when a problem turned into a plan. He chose the second one. He slipped the paper into his pocket, clicked off his flashlight, and started back. Halfway up the footbridge, the crossing lights woke without warning. Red, red, red. The bell began to clang. Far down the line, a horn sounded. Ethan looked left. A headlight bloomed, small as a star. He hurried. At the bottom of the bridge, a shape waited, tall, still, coat flapping. Ethan's breath froze. The shape did not block the stairs or hold out a hand. It only watched. The light of the oncoming engine seemed to stretch the shadow, pulling it long across the gravel until it touched Ethan's shoes. He thought of Jenna's text. He thought of his dad's steady voice, of his mom's chili on the table cooling, of Penny's press flat and the pretty hiding the dangerous. He raised a flashlight, thumb ready to click it on, and heard a whisper that might come from the wind or the figure or from nowhere at all. "You looked at what's real." The horn screamed. The rails sang. In the white glare, the figure lifted an arm and pointed, not at Ethan this time, but at something behind him. Ethan turned and saw a second figure standing on the tracks, swaying, arms loose, as if sleepwalking into the light. The train thundered closer, closer, the ground shaking under Ethan's feet. The angel of death on the tracks was no longer a rumor. He was choosing, right in front of Ethan, and the train was almost here. The horn screamed like a living thing, shaking the night apart. Ethan's body moved before his mind did. He sprinted down the steps of the bridge, his flashlight bouncing wildly in his hand. Gravel cut through his sneakers as he threw himself onto the ballast, shouting, "Get off the tracks!" The figure ahead of him didn't move. The train's headlight blasted over both of them now, white and blinding, the rails humming so hard they seemed to sing through Ethan's bones. He lunged forward, caught the person's sleeve, and yanked with everything in him. They tumbled sideways, rolling into dirt as the engine tore past like a steel monster. Wind slapped Ethan's face raw. The ground jumped beneath him. His ears rang until all sound was gone. When the train was finally nothing but a red light shrinking into the distance, Ethan realized he was lying half on top of someone. He scrambled back, panting. It was a man, older, rough-looking, his eyes half closed. His breath came in ragged pulls. Ethan shook his shoulder. "Are you okay? Hey, wake up." The man's lips moved. A whisper slipped out. "Tracks don't end." Then his head lolled sideways, unconscious. Ethan's flashlight beam swung wildly across the ballast. The tall shadow he had seen, coat, hat, the angel of death, was gone. Only the cold night air and the smell of diesel stayed behind. Heart hammering. Ethan grabbed the stranger's arm and pulled him farther from the rails. He wanted to run home, slam the door, and never speak of this. But the note in his pocket crinkled against his chest. Trains carry more than freight. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He yanked his phone from his pocket, hand shaking, and dialed 911. Sheriff Collins's voice came on the line within minutes. Soon, flashing red and blue lights cut the darkness, scattering the crickets back into silence. The sheriff stepped out, wide-shouldered in his brown uniform. He crouched beside the unconscious man. "Who found him?" "I did," Ethan stammered, Sheriff Collins studied him. "Son, what in the world were you doing out here?" Ethan opened his mouth, but the words twisted inside him. If he told the sheriff about the angel, about the figure pointing, about the note, would Collins believe him? Or would he just say it was a trick of the light, a boy's imagination? Ethan swallowed. "I saw him on the tracks. I pulled him off before the train hit." The sheriff's eyes softened. That was brave. Dangerous, but brave. He glanced at the man on the ground. Name's Raymond Kessler. Drifter. He's been in county lockup before. Nothing big. Trespassing, mostly. Collins leaned closer, sniffed. "Smells like he's been drinking." 2 paramedics lifted Raymond onto a stretcher and into the back of an ambulance. His head lolled, eyes shut, but his lips kept moving, as if he was mumbling a dream. Sheriff Collins put a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Don't go near the tracks at night again. Understand me?" "Yes, sir." Ethan nodded, but the note in his pocket burned hotter. The sheriff's car rolled away. The ambulance's siren wailed off into the distance. And Ethan was left with silence again, heavy as a train that had almost killed him. The next morning at school, news had already spread. Kids whispered in the hallway about Ethan saving a man's life. Jenna met him by his locker, eyes wide. "Everyone says you pulled some guy off the tracks. Is it true?" "Yeah," Ethan muttered. "Was it the angel of death?" she asked in a hush. Ethan's stomach twisted. He remembered the figure pointing. The whisper. You looked at what's real, but he only shrugged. "I don't know." The day passed in a blur of teachers' questions and kids staring. By evening, he just wanted the world quiet again. At dinner, his dad asked him to tell the story. Ethan left out the shadow, the pointing, the note. His mom reached across the table and squeezed his hand, relief in her eyes. "You're safe. That's what matters." After dinner, Ethan slipped upstairs. He pulled the folded note from his pocket, laid it flat on his desk, and stared. Trains carry more than freight. He traced the letters with his finger. They were too neat for a drunk drifter, too precise. Whoever wrote, it wanted to be understood. At midnight, Ethan woke with a start. A sound echoed faint through the walls, the whistle of a train. Nothing unusual, but then, layered beneath, he heard something else. Tapping. Slow, steady, like someone knocking metal against stone. He sat up, heart pounding. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it sounded like it was coming from the yard. He crept to his window, parted the blinds. Down by the tracks, in the pale glow of the crossing lights, stood the figure in the coat and hat, the angel of death. In one hand, he held a long piece of rail spike, striking it against the ground. Tap, tap, tap. With the other hand, he raised a folded white paper and let it drop onto the gravel. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The shadow lifted his head just enough that the brim of the hat no longer covered his mouth. And for the first time, Ethan saw him smile. Then the crossing lights went dark. The night swallowed the figure whole. Ethan rushed downstairs, yanked on his sneakers, and slipped into the yard. He sprinted to the spot where the paper had fallen. It lay on the gravel, heavy with dew. He bent down, hands shaking, and picked it up. This note had just 3 words, written in the same careful hand. "Next, your house." Ethan's stomach dropped. His yard felt colder, his house behind him suddenly fragile. He clutched the paper to his chest, every hair on his arm standing on end. And then, from inside his house, upstairs, a window slammed shut. The word scratched into the basement wall made Ethan's skin crawl. "You live on borrowed time." The letters were deep, jagged, carved as if the writer wanted them to bleed through the concrete. The basement door slammed shut behind him. He spun around, flashlight beam darting wildly. "Hello." His voice cracked, swallowed by the dark. No answer, only silence, heavy as iron. He aimed the beam back toward the coal room. The pennies lay in a trail, gleaming like little eyes. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow shift in the corner, a long coat brushing the wall. He held his breath. The light flickered. Then, as if a switch had been thrown, the basement filled with sound, the faraway rumble of a train. It grew louder, closer, until Ethan could swear the house itself shook. Dust rained from the ceiling beams. His flashlight slipped in his sweaty grip. "No," he whispered. "There's no track under here." But the sound rolled on, clack, 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 like wheels over rails. His heart hammered in time with it. He backed toward the stairs, only to see something lying on the bottom step. Another note. He snatched it up, hands trembling. 3 words again, written in that same precise hand. "Look behind you." Ethan froze. His chest tightened. Every part of him screamed not to turn. But slowly, against his will, he did. The beam of his flashlight landed on a face. The figure was there, the angel of death on the track's hat, pulled low, coat hanging like shadow. But this time Ethan saw more. A pale jaw, lips curved into a small, deliberate smile. In one hand, he held a railroad spike. In the other, another folded paper. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared. Ethan's voice scraped out his throat. "What do you want?" The figure stepped forward, slow and steady. The rumble of the phantom train grew deafening. Ethan's legs wanted to run, but he was cornered. The angel placed the paper on the floor between them and tapped it once with a spike. Then he turned, melted back into the dark, as if the basement walls had swallowed him. The rumble faded. The silence returned. Ethan crouched, heart pounding, and picked up the paper. This time the words were longer, neater. Some frayed his flesh, some frayed his fear. The tracks always carry both. Follow them, or they follow you. Ethan's stomach dropped. He shoved the note into his pocket, bolted up the stairs, and burst into the kitchen. His parents, startled, came running. "What on earth is going on?" his mom demanded. There's someone in the basement." Ethan shouted. His dad grabbed a bat from the hall closet and thundered downstairs. But when he came back up, his face was pale. "Nothing. No one down there. But I saw him." Ethan's voice cracked. He pulled out the note, unfolded it, shoved it at his dad. Mr. Brooks read it, frown deepening. "This isn't a prank." He looked at his wife, then at Ethan. "We're going to the sheriff. Now." Within the hour, Sheriff Collins stood in their kitchen, radio crackling at his side. He studied the note, then the boy. "You're saying you saw him face to face?" Ethan nodded hard. Collins exhaled. "You're not the first. Folks in towns all along this line have reported a man who comes and goes with the trains. Leaves notes. Leaves pennies. They call him the railroad killer." Ethan's stomach tightened. "So he's real." The sheriff's jaw clenched. "Too real. And if he's here, he's choosing Sycamore Junction now." That night, Collins parked his cruiser by the old station, lights off, engine quiet. His deputies spread out near the grain shed, the footbridge, the water tower. Ethan's family stayed locked inside the house. But Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at his window, watching the rails glisten in the moonlight. At midnight sharp, the whistle came, long, mournful, carrying across the fields. A freight train thundered through town, cars rattling, wheels sparking. Ethan's eyes followed it until he froze. There, standing on the last car, as it roared past, a tall figure in a long coat, hat low, holding something shiny that caught the moonlight, a spike, and as the train shrieked away into the night, the figure lifted his hand and pointed straight at Ethan's window. Ethan stumbled back from the glass, heart slamming in his chest. The sound of the train faded, leaving the night in eerie silence. But the gesture stayed burned into his mind. The next morning, Sheriff Collins found another note nailed to the station door. The same handwriting, the same careful strokes. The angel rides on, town to town, track to track. Try to catch him, and he will already be gone. The sheriff folded it carefully, eyes grim. "We won't stop hunting him," he told Ethan's dad. But his voice carried no comfort. For days after, Sycamore Junction buzzed with fear. People locked their doors earlier, pulled curtains tight at night, and kept children close. No one saw the angel again. Not there, not then. But the rails still sang each night, carrying their steel river to the heart of town. And every time Ethan heard that whistle, long and lonely, he felt the same chill creep into his bones. The angel of death on the tracks had marked him. And though the trains moved on, Ethan knew in his heart, so did the Angel,